Hello, hello. How's everybody doing here?
Good.
Great. Hi. My first time here, so nice to meet you guys.
Yes, welcome. Thanks for coming.
hmm
What brings you here?
I've been working over the last year on a virtual reality experience called Planting Disabled Futures. I'm one of the Just Tech Fellows. I don't know if Just Tech means something to you guys.
I think I've heard of that. Which organization is that through again?
It's Just Tech is Justice and Technology, and it's the Social Sciences Council, something, something. But Just Tech is its own sort of thing, and we have many people who work on disability stuff or racialization stuff and, those sorts of things, different kinds of approaches to social justice and technology. And my particular angle is virtual reality and community performance. Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome.
And who are
Yeah,
you guys?
I was gonna say, should we do a quick round of introductions? It's like a pretty small group today, which is partially on me because I've been a little bit swamped and haven't sent out the reminders and picked a subject ahead of time. But I'll appreciate y'all joining anyhow. But yeah, I can start. So I'm Dylan Fox. I'm the director of operations for XR Access. You're probably familiar with this, but just in case, we're a research initiative at Cornell focused on making virtual and augmented reality accessible. I'm living out here in Oakland in the Bay Area,
Oh,
uh, and yeah, background in engineering and UX design before I got into kind of accessibility and the uh, social aspects of technology.
cool. Thanks.
Yeah, David.
Sure. I'm David Tucker. I'm a developer at a video game company called iRacing. We make race car games, but we have a high level of VR users. So, and my focus is on accessibility in the game. So,
Awesome. Jesse?
Yeah, hello. My name is Jesse Anderson, and by day I work as an assistive technology specialist, working with blind and visually impaired students. Outside of that, I am also part of XR Access and a few other technology groups and such. And I do, outside of my day job in that, I do work in technology and game and XR accessibility. And I've been running the illegally cited YouTube channel for, well, since 2012. So keeping busy. And I'm really into all this stuff too. So
Nice to meet you.
Awesome.
Bye.
Um, so I think the main thing I was hoping to kind of pick folks' brains on today was kind of an AI research assistant that I've been thinking about. Um, but before that, I wanted to open up if there's anything y'all had in terms of kind of discussion topics you want to talk about or burning questions. Um, David, before I forget, I want to make sure you see, do you know Brian Smith's racing auditory display?
yes.
Okay, good, good. Yeah, we had a presentation about, he did a presentation on that and a few of his other projects at the symposium this year. And if you hadn't seen it, I was going to say, like, definitely watch that.
Cool.
I definitely want to know how to get my hands on. I would love to get me a review copy of the or review hardware of that high-end Meta glasses and that band because I'm really curious about
Yeah,
that. I read an article that was linked on Twitter a day or two ago that apparently Meta is actually including screen reader and magnification in the thing, which I was not expecting at all.
Yeah, it looks like the screen reader. I mean, it's got focused microphone arrays. So that it can actually pick up on what you're looking at and isolate all the other sounds. So you can do uh, whatever you call it. You can do voice to text just by focusing on somebody. You can hear what they're saying in a crowded environment or see what they're saying.
Right, but
nice.
like
That's awesome.
for the visual stuff, like the display where there's text, there's actually going to be a screen reader on there,
Yeah, that'd be
like
interesting,
text to
but
speech.
it's
So
a really
that's
small
really
little
interesting.
display. I don't know. It's
Yeah, I'm very excited for their the wristband that it's apparently going to ship with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I want to play with. That's what I'm more intrigued about than anything.
Because I could see that being like the new Connect, in that, it was made Connect was made by Microsoft as part of Xbox. It's just this like fun gaming thing, and then ended up becoming just standard piece of hardware in so many different studies and kits, because it's just,
Hmm.
hey, look, here's a relatively cheap thing that can like map people's limbs automatically, and that has tons of applications. And
Right.
seeing
And
what they've
even for like motor
Like our Fitbit.
accessibility,
Yeah,
like the,
exactly.
little gestures and things, just to be able to do subtle gestures and control things, maybe.
Hmm.
Mhm. Now we'll have to see how how friendly they are to people like cracking this neural band and letting other people get access to the data in it. Um, like, for researchers and developers and things like that. But I mean, seems like potentially a very powerful tool.
Hmm.
How much is it retailing for right now? What's the initial price
I
point
Like
for that
think
thing?
they
eight
said
hundred bucks.
800.
Yeah,
Say again?
$800
Oh
Well, it's
yeah, no.
$800 for with the
both.
band included, I think.
Yeah.
So they're just putting the
Correct.
band, I think this, and I'm looking at this page here.
Are they
Correct.
Um,
selling the
Will
band
likely go
standalone? I
down.
don't think
So
so.
I don't know. Let's see.
I mean,
I wonder if they ever issue like review hardware, like testing hardware to be like, hey, I'd love to evaluate and share this with the accessibility community.
Yeah, yeah.
I would love that
but
somehow.
we are the people who are the main audiences and the main buyers for that stuff to begin with, right? So I don't know.
Hmm.
Right.
I mean, it almost reminds me of just like a Fitbit or something. Oh, I wonder how multi-purpose this thing is going to be.
I don't know.
Let's see. Oh, it says if you're in the US, you can book an in-person demo, seemingly prior to purchase the glasses at one of these stores.
Hmm.
Available from September 30th. Uh, yeah, price at 800 with a neural band in the box.
they have a
Huh.
Cool.
store in San Francisco. You can just walk into their headquarters, try it out.
I'm in St. Paul, Minnesota, so
Yeah,
it's
well,
a little far away.
a little far away.
Let's see. What do they call it? The
It'll be at
neural
all the
band?
expos, right? Everybody's gonna bring those to all the expos.
Yeah.
Hmm. Although I heard that the live demo did not go so well.
Yeah, I watched part of it, and there were two parts of the demo that just kind of crashed and burned a little bit. But in a way, I'm kind of glad we got to see that though, because I kind of would rather see something actually done live than like the pre-canned, like here, this is what it should look like in theory.
It's true, because you can't believe that stuff anyway.
Exactly.
Well,
Hmm.
it didn't seem to be the interface. It was their AI stuff that was crashing.
Yeah,
Well,
the kits
my
are
world,
demo and their live call.
our world is based on is built in a Quest for Quest 3, obviously. So I get advertised this thing every other day. I mean, I just get it all the time just because I have my subscription. So,
Hmm.
and it'll probably get cheaper than 800 bucks pretty soon too, I imagine.
Hmm.
One hopes.
And then a coworker of mine told me this morning that I haven't found it yet, but I think I got to look at, what was it called? I think the Double Tap podcast was talking about it, where Meta is opening up their Meta Glasses APIs so that other developers can actually develop for it. And rumor has it that Microsoft is going to be doing their Seeing AI on their platform at some point.
Hmm.
So intriguing, even on the regular
Yeah.
Ray-Bans that I have now.
Yeah.
I
Well, we'll
really,
see how all the access goes, right? I mean, my team is currently struggling with figuring out how to push our planting disabled futures into the meta world. And there's so many hoops you have to jump through. So,
Hmm.
I'm sure you are the guys who know that that is not an easy thing. This is
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm looking
uh,
forward to for the Android XR is Android has tend to be much better about making it easy to just
there's stuff on.
use your own hardware and like put up developmental
Mm.
things and share things out without it having to get approved by Meta first. right? Approved by some
I
central
agree.
organization.
Right.
We just went with whatever was the lowest consumer price point, and at 250 right now, that's pretty unbeatable for the Quest sets, right? So yeah, but yeah, it's always shifting.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm reading a review of the Meta smart glasses titled, "I regret to inform you, Meta's new smart glasses are the best I've ever tried." Uh, and it says, about video calls. You'll be able to see whoever's calling, and you'll be able to see your point of view too. Tried a video call with Jay. Well, it was incredibly cool to see his face flooding my vision. I couldn't help feeling like a spy about to steal some corporate secrets in a high-stakes heist.
I wonder what the field of view for that screen is, though, because when I tried the X-Real glasses, that was really a problem for me because it was really
Mhm.
tied to your vision.
You were
Says
saying 20
600
degrees
by
or something?
600
Yeah.
pixels with a 20-degree field of view.
That's pretty small.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
And
mean,
you
I
have
think
to look
it's
down to see it too.
like a video. You see a video in front of you,
Yeah.
basically. It's not
Hmm.
immersive.
yeah, it's definitely not augmented reality where it's like you're seeing holograms on the things around you.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
No, it's more like Google Glasses, just
Yeah.
bigger.
Yeah, I'm very
I
curious.
just wonder what the applications will be that they're going to push to these. I mean, there's Meta is still trying to figure out, right, what kind of games are of interest, what kind of experiences are of interest. So
I
these
mean,
glasses sound like they're mainly productivity software.
yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, I could see like, especially if they kept it really simple, like just on the screen, let's say you're doing like a walking route or something, just having like a little arrow pointing like go forward or go take a right. Like, don't even include like a map or anything, but just like, okay, there's your arrow, turn to the right on this next intersection.
Hmm.
That'd be kind of
Yeah,
neat.
I'm very curious to see just the limits of the visual processing, right? Because I think the powerful thing in my mind is the ability to take what it can see in the camera field of view and just apply computing to that, right? In terms of being able to I don't know, read text and equations in order to just recognize like where you are and a lot of things that have terrifically scary privacy implications. But
Right.
also,
Like the
you,
description of what you're seeing in front of you for blind
Right.
folks, right? What is it that you're
right,
seeing? What's next to you? What's next to that? Yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
we just had a nice community discussion about privacy, and there's theoretically ways to ameliorate that, but a lot of it just comes down to hoping the stuff stays on device, and if it doesn't, hoping the stuff it doesn't get just held on to indefinitely.
Mm, yeah.
Hmm.
Well, that
See
needs
that.
Yeah.
some laws.
Hmm?
That needs some laws. We
Mm-hmm.
won't have privacy until there's an EU policy or whatever that says don't keep this.
Yeah. There's an interesting. We were talking at the privacy discussion. There's a group right now called For Humanity that is proposing auditors, like data auditors. In the same
Hmm.
way you'd have like a CPA accountant to, audit somebody's finances, go in and look over all their books and make sure they're not up to no good. We need those, but for data. Somebody
Right.
that can like go into big organizations, not sharing it with anybody, not sharing it with the public, the
Right.
government, but just somebody that is like trustworthy to go in and confirm, yes, they're not keeping data that they said they wouldn't, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea at all.
Yeah,
Like LEED certification, like for buildings, right?
Right.
So some
right,
kind of voluntary certification standard that you can
Hmm.
buy into.
right. And it's tricky
Yeah, that'd be
because,
good.
I think that they're going to have to be forced into allowing that, but it might be something that they're more eager to allow than just like making it public and full transparency.
Right.
Yeah, but we'll have to see.
For me, I
Yeah.
really see this being a big beneficial for hard of hearing. Like,
Yes.
I mean, I
Oh, for sure.
just like you see everybody wearing AirPods now because they don't want to, you know, buy hearing aids. I see older men, walking around with these on because they don't want to look like they're going deaf. I mean, my dad would never use a hearing aid, but he'd put these things on and stare at you.
Hmm.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah,
Well,
I'm
and
curious
that's what I
how.
like. Oh,
Oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Sorry.
I was just gonna say I'm curious how comfortable it is to read captions in that because I tried the is it Nreal
X-Real,
some
I think.
Xreal maybe I tried one a pair of glasses at AWE that was just real-time captioning and it worked pretty damn well and it was just displaying the captions kind of
Hmm.
right.
just in the lower center of the screen uh
Hmm.
So I wonder how difficult it is, whether the display location is suitable for that, or if it's easy enough to read text on. Because yeah, so that could be a fantastic application.
I would
Well,
imagine
does it
that's exactly
does it
what they're made
adapt to?
for, right? Yeah, because they're
Yeah,
not visually immersive. Like as an artist, I'm always
Hmm.
interested in what can give us that kind of idea of you being in another world, or this world is really, augmented in an interesting way. That's not what these things are for. They seem more like
no,
that kind of productivity, accessibility, zooming with people. I bet they're
Hmm.
really good for that because there's already so many applications that allow you to just stream the captions, in an easy way. I mean, even in the
Right.
Quest headset, the captions are not a problem at all.
right.
Mm.
And oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say I have several deaf friends, and they often are using their phone, but it's awkward, because your phone's not sitting right in front of you, you know. So we'll try to be talking, and then they're like, okay, hold up, say it again, hold up my phone. If it's just there integrated into your face, I can see it being always on, much more accessible. You know,
Hmm.
um,
And it would
kind of
go
like back when
mm,
the Sidekick came out. I don't know if you remember that. Like all our deaf friends' kids would have sidekicks, and they just sit there and texted each other as fast as they could, because suddenly it was so much easier to get the information out. I mean, now you have a smartphone, but before that, it was slow trying to sign to each other. And
well,
it really,
mm.
yeah, go
It
ahead.
would, it would integrate so much better with the deaf
Yeah,
culture, right? Because deaf culture is this visual culture where you mainly look at people facially
you
and
look at facially, yeah, exactly.
the hands around you. So it
Yeah,
would allow you to not just look down and then look up to see,
yeah,
it would integrate deaf speech and
yeah,
language production in a really different way. So that's what I would think would be very cool
yeah.
for
I
deaf.
just I remember going to a basketball game, a deaf basketball game, 15 years ago, and all the students were sitting around in circles with their heads touching each other, looking at their sidekicks, texting as fast as they could, because that was, the optimal way to communicate, because you could show each other your sidekick while you were texting, and
Mhm.
it just really intrigued me that they developed this whole other way of interacting where they're, you know, whereas, hearing kids are like staring off into space. They're all separated out from each other. So
Yeah.
anyway,
As far
I can see this really changing your way of interacting.
yeah, no, I mean, especially the thinking about that there's a way to make that into like two-way communication. I was just thinking about the the band
Right,
again, that ability to like type things out or like swipe things out, or to have it
Hmm.
register that without it having to be like in this field of view
right,
from the headset. That could be potentially very powerful as well. Of You can imagine like I'm imagining like a pair of deaf people armed with these that are or not even deaf people, just anybody that
right.
could be kind of almost have telepathy of like sitting there, look at each other and just like it just down, in their pocket or wherever, just like sending messages, uh,
Well,
and then having it pop up in the captions display.
and I've had a really weird couple of instances too where I'll go somewhere and I'm going to pick up like a Uber or a Lyft or something, and there's been a couple of times where I've had a deaf or hard of hearing driver. They note that when they on their little profile when their car comes and they pick you up,
Hmm.
and so like being able to, since the glasses they also have sound in them to be able to like, oh, have like a more visually impaired and a hearing impaired, like being able to communicate easier somehow.
Right.
Did they come with translation? I know that's an app that's getting more and more common here.
Yeah, they said it works, but it's a little delayed, but I figured they'll sort that out.
Yeah, I mean, I expect a delay if it's having to translate.
Well, I
They
think it's
do
got to
that in
go all the way
iPhones
out to the
already.
cloud. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's not doing it on your phone yet.
Oh man, you start to get to the point where it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't be, my full capacity, my full features of myself unless I have like Wi-Fi access.
Right.
Hmm.
Oh man, there's a book I read ages ago called Accelerando. Um, it's this kind of sci-fi that it starts off with this idea that we've managed to develop ways to just like think and have computers like go out and get information, come back and bring it back to us and store memories and things. Um, and it starts off with the story of the protagonist who has gotten so deep into this that when suddenly somebody comes along and mugs him and takes all of his devices, he can't remember his home address because
Right.
it's just
Oh
he
no.
didn't store it in his wetware, he stored it in his hardware.
Oh,
Uh, and
Plenty of
I
people
think
wouldn't
about
know
that a
their own
lot.
phone number. So
Yeah.
that's actually interesting that you guys are bringing this up because that is literally one of the features that we're focusing a lot in planting
Mm,
disabled futures. We're creating our world so small that it literally fits onto the headset. So we do not need any Wi-Fi, any connectivity,
mm,
not only for, energy issues and, like, environmental stuff. It's a planned world. So environmental issues are important, but also because so many of the disabled people
Ooh.
that I work with, and I'm disabled myself, there's a lot of hesitancy around data sharing. We already mentioned that, right? The surveillance issue. So if there's no connectivity back, there is no data gathering. So that was a very important feature of the project, how to keep the packet small enough to just stay on one headset. So you don't need to be out in the cloud at all.
that's
Hmm.
good.
It's been really
I
helpful.
just found that book on audio and I can add it to my library for free.
which one?
Accelerando.
Oh
Oh,
yeah, yeah, nice. Oh yeah, because they published it open source.
Nice.
There's some warnings for I think some like violence and sexual assault and things like that.
Ah,
So do be careful. But it's yeah, I remember it. It
sounds
must be 10 or
interesting.
15 years ago, being a hell of a read because it explores some very kind of high sci-fi concepts about what does it mean to be human once you can start transferring your brain around to different things and things like that.
Yeah, I just downloaded it.
Yeah, yeah,
Sounds cool.
yeah. It's a fun one.
I was wondering on this band if it would work for ASL, ALS, or other mobility issues. I, I don't know how adaptive it's going to be. Do you need to have good motor skills to be able to use it, or can it be a
That's what I was wondering, because if you can do, they were mentioning on the presentation how you could do just subtle movements to be able to gesture or do controls or typing, and that's what I was wondering if somebody with limited motor movement would be able to make use of that.
yeah?
It's a good question because I know when they demoed it last year at the symposium, they showed a video of somebody who didn't have any hands or didn't was missing his right hand, I think,
Using it.
and was still be able to use it to kind of simulate doing a pinch and things like that,
Huh,
which I thought was pretty wild because the nerve impulses still run, right? There's just nothing to receive them on the other end, but it still runs
right.
through the wrist. Um,
Fascinating.
but yeah, that's a good question when it comes to people whose nerve impulses are a little bit more scrambled. I don't know. That's a very good
I
question.
already pre-ordered two pair of glasses that are coming out pretty soon, and I really don't want to spend another $800, but I want to play with it.
Yeah, yeah. I know. I'm a little bit torn because it's like, do I really need this for anything?
Yeah, I
No, not right
know.
now.
No, I
But
don't either, but
I guess if those of you who are campus access specialists, for instance, you might be the kinds of people who might be helping people fine tune these kinds of apparati in order to get them tuned to whatever
Yeah.
radius, whatever movement capacities and affordances people have. So that
yeah,
might be a whole new skill set that might be added to access specialists, for instance, on campuses
it's
and
true.
elsewhere.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I think trying to keep up with the new tech and all the implications it has for accessibility is kind of a full-time job.
amen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
just
as an assistive technology specialist, like, whether it's adult clients or, high school, early college, the transition where what I'm primarily working in, like, just keeping track of people ask us about, Windows, Mac, Android, iOS, and now you got like these wearables, and it's like
yeah.
there's only so much we can either afford or even be able to keep up with.
Makes
Yeah.
sense.
I love doing it, but
No, it's tricky. I mean, so actually that brings me to the next is one of the things I want to chat with you all about. So I've been working recently on getting up to speed on retrieval augmented generation, which is a type of large language model that rather than just kind of going off of the whole training base and is likely to just kind of fart out hallucinations when you ask it something it doesn't know, would be trained on specific documents and specific databases. And you can train them ideally to cite their sources and to, uh, if they don't know something, to just say that and to kind of train people on their limits.
Hmm.
Um, and I've been thinking about trying to make one of these that would be focused on XR accessibility, so that if somebody had a question about it, it could answer it in kind of real time and plain language, right? Um, I think in my mind, that's one of the most powerful features of these is that it expands search from needing to know like specific keywords and specific, you know, ways to approach a search to letting people who are not experts still search effectively because it's just going based on these kind of vector-based
I think
themes.
that's one of the things I've liked most in the last couple of years, just about the transition in AI in general is, even you go from like a smart speaker, like a Google Home or Echo, and where you have to have the exact syntax and just being able to more conversationally ask a question. And even if you don't get like the exact terms right, it kind of figures it out. And it's been pretty miraculous for that type of thing.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. My grandfather went blind. He had some ocular degeneration, and his life got very small. And I always thought if he'd been alive long enough to get a smart speaker, his world would have been so much bigger. Just to be able to
There's
say, listen to this audiobook or whatever.
Yeah, there's so much like there. I always tell people there's never been a better time to be blind or visually impaired. Because I should mention I'm legally blind myself, so I use all this stuff, and it's amazing some of the stuff like the Be My Eyes app, and
Yeah.
it's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
always tell people we're all going to be disabled someday, so we might as well start working on it now.
Yep.
I think one of the biggest problems for that kind of stuff in implementation is like right now we have our 86-year-old, my 86-year-old mom-in-law. She just moved in with us a few weeks ago, and just getting people to understand
Yeah.
navigation
Yeah.
is, I mean, even navigating a different TV set is a incredible cliff, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
getting her to understand how Libby, the audio part of the library, how that works is, it's so hard. So I wish people would just work on much more unified
Yes.
interfaces, particularly for elders with some mild cognitive impairments. We're not talking
Yeah.
stuff here. We're just talking an older woman who's just,
Well, and I think that's where like the conversational style would actually really help, as long as it was plugged into the services that she would need,
Right.
instead of having to memorize like, oh, do this to play this book or whatever. But it's like, I want to read this book or I want to listen to this radio station, and it would just know, oh, you want to listen to radio station, so I'm going to launch iHeartRadio in the background, and she doesn't have to know anything.
yeah.
But that's where you need that standard. Every TV needs to be able to talk to the smart speaker so that it can,
Every
integrate.
Roku needs to be able to talk to, this is what you do when you want the subtitles to be really large, so
Right.
rather than
Hmm.
every single app having a different pathway that no one
Which
can remember.
subtitles
Yeah.
are always different on every TV
Yeah.
And the
No,
problem is that everybody wants you to stay in their
in their
ecosystem, so there's not
ecosystem. Right. There's no,
incentivized to make it standard.
right. No, I think that's definitely a part where these kind of AIs could be helpful, I think, because I was working with somebody at San Jose State whose master's project was on uh, basically AI to assist people in using VR apps that have mobility or cognitive disorders. And the idea was basically that, for a given app, you have a selection of commands, right, of things that people might be able to do. Whether that's like changing the colors on the display or opening a door, whatever. Um, and the kind of central idea of it was that you'd make you'd speak your intention, and the way it would work is the AI would kind of look at your words and figure out, okay, which of the available commands that I've have access to does this correspond with, right?
right.
Hmm.
And assign confidence intervals to like, oh, you said stop. That's like a 99% chance that you want to stop playback. And to do that, I'm just going to stop playback, right? But if
Hmm.
you said, something else, it might be, oh, well, there's a 60% chance that you meant A and a 30% chance that you meant B. well, maybe in that case, I'll ask for clarification. And just using it as, instead of, in the past we've had voice commands that's like you had to memorize the list of voice commands.
Right.
Here it's
Exactly.
just use any voice command you want. We'll figure it out. And if we can't figure it out, we'll check in with you. And I think that is a much more accessible version of that.
100% agree. And that's what I was getting
Yeah,
at exactly.
right, right. And so I think you're starting to see that more and more. Like we have a smart TV right now. It's not very smart, but you can hold the like voice command thing and tell it to do something. Will it do it correctly? Oh, maybe. Not It's dumb smart TVs, but next few years as that kind of gets more integrated, hopefully better and better.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's like why I don't use, like I started when I got my speaker, I used to use the you know who skills, but I stopped using them because even I would forget the syntax. You had to say like, open the thing app to and play this thing and do the thing at this speed. And it's like, well, I haven't done this for 6 weeks. I don't remember what that exact sequence is anymore. So I just stopped using that kind of functionality.
Exactly.
I think one of the interesting things to me will be to see if we have personal assistants that are operating at this next layer, because I think that's what you're seeing a little bit with this idea of agentic AI. Um, it always reminds me of there's a Game Boy game back in the like early 2000s called Mega Man Battle Network. And the idea of this one was that everybody gets a personal like Navi or navigational assistant or whatever that is your agent in cyberspace. And so if you tell your Navi to go, send in my homework, it will like take the PDF file and like run down the cyber highway and
Mm.
give it to the teacher's like Navi, and then it would pop up, right? Um, and of course, because it's a game, you use these for battles, and fighting viruses is literally like having a combat with cannons and laser beams. But I always thought about it because one of the aspects of it is that everybody gets to kind of customize their Navi and tailor, um, either like consciously tailor them or even just have it automatically kind of shape themselves into a form that is agreeable, a form that understands them.
Well,
Um, oh, go ahead.
interestingly, I don't know if any of you have heard of the Ally app. Came out early this summer, I believe. It's geared toward blind low vision, but what's kind of neat about it is you can give it whatever information, like when you do the app, um, you give it whatever information you want it to know about you. And then you can create, the reason they call it Ally is because it comes with like four kind of pre-built to get you started. But then you build like, and I'm sure it's going to expand in its capability and functionality, but you can kind of give each ally like a different personality. So it's like, oh, if I'm doing like school stuff, I might want to use this ally because I told it this is how I want you to behave and do this type of information. Whereas like I have, one that's more serious and that I use more for work, but then I have one that's really kind of an actual, kind of a more relaxed, but like entertainment based, a little more rough around the edges, a little not safe for work, kind of Johnny Lawrence kind of AI. And that's what's fascinating. Like you can kind of even customize different kind of personas to help in different situations, even.
That's interesting. I think a lot of this, it you still need that data layer. Like our game is very accessible if you've got all the right tools in place, but you got to know, I need to go get this, camera set up that's going to read my face and turn it into a joystick and do whatever. Um,
Mhm.
if our game could output a data stream and just say, look, here's all the inputs we accept, here's all the outputs we have, here's
Mhm.
descriptors on them, and let the AI figure it out, then the user maybe could automate the whole thing where they just go, okay, my system works this way, and then I'm going to talk to the game, and the game's going to tell me what it can do, and they'll just sync together. But without those data sets, that metadata coming out of each application or each television, it's still going to be a
Does,
lot of manual putting it together.
does your
Uh,
game have a lot of blind low vision accessibility in it?
we don't. we've been in talks with some people to try to get it going, but what we do is, draw lines on the ground and stuff so you can see it. But
Sure.
doing the voice prompts where it's telling you turn ahead in 30 feet. We don't
Yeah.
have
Have
that
you
yet.
seen the Forza Motorsport? What
Yeah,
they did
yeah,
was incredible.
yeah. It's really neat. It gets really hard when you start having, so we can have like 63 other cars on track. That's where it gets really hard. It's like,
Oh yeah.
how do you,
I can only
how,
imagine.
how do you deal with that?
Oh,
But solo
I'm
driving is different.
I'm trying to imagine making Mario Kart blind low vision accessible, and that would be a uphill battle.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd kill for that.
What's happening right now? Oh, well, you've got a star going. Somebody just ran by you with a blooper on their back, and somebody else is launching a red shell this way. And
But I've seen like Microsoft Flight Simulator, they've done some really great things because they have this data concept where every element on the screen, every little display can read itself out to an external tool. And then people have developed these voice tools where it'll tell you exactly what's going on in your sim, and then you can call out, turn the flaps to 2 or whatever. Um,
Hmm.
You just
it
need a
works.
very different kind of crypt time in order to
Yeah,
play that kind of game then, right? Because the temporality is very different from when you're playing visually focused.
right.
Audio focus just has a whole different
Yeah.
temporality because you have to take in all the different things sequentially.
Yes,
We're
exactly.
trying to develop an audio forward pathway through we have a tree world. So we have a visual forward pathway and an audio forward pathway, both of which have the regular stuff like,
Right.
captions and audio descriptions and all of that. But that's one of the intriguing things. So
Yeah.
you layer things up? How do you
Yeah.
slow it down in an interesting way? Yeah.
Well, and I think that's where, it works really good in flight simulators because it's a very slow process. You
Mm.
takeoff is a 5-minute process, landing's a 5-minute
Right.
process. So you've got time to realize I'm too high, I'm too low, whatever, I'm doing the wrong thing. But there's whole communities centered around it where completely blind users with no visual input are able to land and fly in flight simulator. So to me, that's very intriguing, and it's
Excuse me.
because they output just a ton of data out of the sim and let third-party tools deal with it.
Mhm.
yeah,
So
the example I always think of for this is Sightless Combat, who's the Twitch streamer that plays Mortal Kombat, I think. Unless I'm getting
yeah,
mixed up, but that's something you definitely don't have time to wait for a screen reader, right? You're just kind of it's the extreme of usable without being accessible, kind of. If you look
right.
at that, of like it doesn't give you everything. It gives you the barest bit of what you need to know, and you better have memorized everything, but it is doable in real time.
Yeah,
Yeah, and they've added a lot more actual, like you can turn on extra sounds and like if you know
right.
certain fighters, like you can tell just by the sound of what their kick or their punch is. Oh, they're doing a high kick. Oh, they're doing their roundhouse. Like you can literally, I know several pe blind people who play that game that they're better than I am for sure. And they're like just watching people at the Cento Showdown tournament that they have usually every year or two has been fascinating.
Yeah, and that's it. If you could distill the whole EVE environment down to audio cues, and it's very doable.
I wonder if it would be possible to leverage AI to help designers create those kind of audio forward experiences. This would probably be very tricky. I don't think it's doable with like data we have today, but if you could somehow kind of describe that process that they use for Mortal Kombat of like assigning extra noises and making sure that there is enough information, and somehow create a guide that could help other creators like do that for their applications.
I,
Depends on
I see a.
speed,
Oh,
yeah.
go ahead.
Sorry.
I was gonna say I see a world where AI is assisting you in the play. So like we're doing a project with Microsoft right now where they're taking our data and training AI to drive our simulator completely, standalone, so that the computer's doing all the driving. And I can see a world where you do something like that, but then you start handing partial control back to the player. So if a blind user only had to concentrate on, say, controlling the throttle and the AI could steer the car, then all of a sudden it's a lot more accessible. You can have just the voice telling you you're this far away from the braking zone, start braking, whatever, and you don't have to think about 3D spatial, you know, anymore. You're just down to a 2D problem. And
Right.
then obviously you could take on more and more control as you get better at whatever it is you're doing. Um, but I
Yeah,
can
because at
totally see that world.
the same time, I know like because before they had the Forza Motorsport in the previous Forza Horizon games, they kind of had that thing where like the the car would kind of be auto steered for you, and all you really did was hold down the accelerator, and people didn't really like that because it's like, well, then if the game is playing itself, what agency do I have? Like, what am I
Right.
really doing?
But if you could dynamically set that on your own terms, you know what I'm
Right.
saying? Then I think it's
Hmm.
valuable.
For
In
sure.
a world that, we're a whole bunch of people and it's very slow compared to anything you guys are talking about, right? So
Yeah,
this is just an artistic world, and we use echolocation, which is
right.
really fun. I mean, it's also kind of hard because some
Yes.
of us are much better at echolocation than others. We're just using spatial sound in the headset to get us from one portal to the next. And it's really it's fun, and we're in the debugging stage for that one right now. It's
What
really
app are you creating again?
it's not an app. It's called Planting Disabled Futures, and it's a world. It's a tree world. You can enter into this tree, fly around the tree. It has portals. And so the functionality I'm talking about is that you would be flying in this world to the different portals. So there's one mode of playing this where it's not at all about visual input. You can have visual input, but we have so many people either blind or epilepsy,
Oh,
migraine. So all the people who don't do Quest visual input, we can do this spatialized audio input. It's very fun, but
oh,
it's
very
very
cool.
intriguing how many of us have real trouble with really distinguishing spatialized sound. It doesn't matter whether we're blind or not. It's just like, just
Yeah.
that kind of fine differentiation is its
It,
own
y-
thing.
Yeah.
It's very
yeah,
hard to do 3D spatialization with just stereo headphones. It's easy
But
to
it's
and
do
no
I,
stereo
headphones. It's
spatialization.
literally, it's literally the
Yeah.
headset, so there's no headphones involved. People do it. It's very interesting how many people can do it, but I'm
hmm
sort of in
But
the
like
middle.
my ears are
binaural
wrong, so
audio works really
yeah,
well.
it gets weird to me if I do spatialized audio. It sounds like it's in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's very ear dependent.
I think
Say
that
again what you just said, Jesse. I didn't hear it.
Oh, I was saying binaural audio really helps as well when you're on a two speaker, like a headphone system.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you see, we don't do that. For us, it's still within the headset because it's like we don't have speakers at all. We just have the Quest headset.
Okay.
This is like
Oh,
all
okay, it's a
shared within
Quest.
a community group. Yeah, we have like house parties. We share our stuff through house parties. We have an access doula who sits with you and who introduces you to, the controllers and stuff. The people I'm
Hmm.
working with are not you guys people. They're the people who have never seen a headset in their lives, right? So we're having like very low, like the threshold experience. How do you, for the first time, put on a headset? And then we
Hmm.
have these different access modes depending on, your sensory affordances. Or
Is that going to hit the Quest store?
it's not yet available. We're working on, hopefully by the end of the year, we hope to have it in the Quest store. Right now,
Okay.
it's just we're developing it, and it's very well, it's pretty much there, but it takes a long time to get it into the freaking Quest store. It's like
Yeah.
Yeah,
the hoops
yeah.
you have to jump
because I
through.
would try it out.
I would love you
I
to try
finally
it
got a
out.
Quest 3, so I'd love to try it out.
I'd love you to try it out. Pretty soon, I will have the link. So, what you can do on Quest is you can have a direct link, and that you can hand out. You don't have to go through all the Quest, the incredible complicated stuff with the store. So, we should have that pretty soon. Or
Hmm.
I can just give you the APK as well. I mean, if you know how to do that, then that's great. I'd love you to play it.
Yeah, there are two things that came to mind while y'all were chatting. I think the first one is we had some research on cited guides, and when it comes to um, this idea of how much assistance do you want, right? That
Mhm.
there's a spectrum from uh, just like and this is a cited virtual human or a virtual AI cited guide in a VR environment. It ranged from just grab my elbow and I'll like tow you to where you want to go
Mhm.
to I'm going to put an audio beacon on the thing that you're interested in, which will just kind of repeatedly make sounds, and you can navigate your own way there,
Right.
Right.
which I thought was a really cool way of kind of maintaining autonomy. Um,
That's exactly our question. We called it like, do you go on the bus or do you
mhm.
have your own agency? The bus, like the short
Right,
bus
right.
situation, right? Yeah. Now we
And
all just everybody who can't do visual, everybody has to get on the bus and gets driven from A to B. And we all said, no, we don't want that. That's silly.
Right, right. And the other one I wanted to flag for you, especially Petra, is this scene weaving seminar that we did
Yeah.
with Microsoft a while back. Have you seen this one?
No, I just clicked on it and it looks
This
fabulously interesting. Yeah, very
this
cool.
was wild. I think it's still in my mind one of the best kind of low vision ways to do VR that I've seen,
Cool.
because it's a mix of bottom up and top down design, where it
Yes.
has bottom up in the sense of echolocation, like you said, as well as I think you can either have an expanding aura and it just reads off objects as they're, whichever is closest,
Hmm.
or vision based, where you kind of gaze around and it tells you what's in your field of view.
Right.
But then it
That sounds great. Yeah.
also has top down, where you can go by room, like, okay, in the kitchen, there's this, and this. And in the living room, there's this, and this. And for each of those, you can have it, the option to learn more about it or just teleport directly to it. And kind of you do the whole thing like a screen reader experience.
Yeah. Also
Um,
great. Yeah.
and I
This
thought that like,
people. That sounds really nice. We're
yeah,
still trying to figure out how to do a combination as well. So if it's hard
right,
for
exactly.
the echolocation, can we then still get on the bus? How do we set up the bus?
Well, and you
Right.
don't have
Having
to
that
be
that
stuck on the
combination is really
bus.
powerful, I thought.
I always like the Mario Kart model where the better you play, the less it assists you in your driving. So if you're doing a really lousy job, it'll just keep nudging you back on the track
Mhm.
and let you keep playing at a higher level than you thought, and it's doing it subtly enough that you're not noticing it's happening. But if you ever try to play Mario Kart with a 6-year-old, you're cooking, going around and they're bouncing off things and somehow they're right beside you. And it's because it's gently pushing them forward to make sure it's competitive and it feels normal.
And feeding the blue shells.
Yeah, and feeding the blue shells to them. Yeah, but
Curse those blue shells.
it's a great idea of not being in your face and just saying, okay, now we're steering for you, but still, so if you got more and more off track, maybe it would guide you more and more back onto track, but still let you navigate kind of a concept, or accelerating time, if it's a racing game, accelerate time so that the slow player's going faster without driving better, stuff like that.
Yeah, one of the things I've been thinking about is this idea of AI kind of helper agents in virtual environments. Of, what should they look like? Should they seem like people or should they be specifically AI? What kind of assistance should they be able to offer you? Right? How should you interact with them? That's one of the things that seems like a huge possibility for making things easier, because I think it seems like we're in this process of transitioning from just everybody kind of relying on their own accessibility tools of, like, if it's a screen reader, you figure out how to do the screen reader and then it's an extension of you. It doesn't have like a will of its own, as opposed to AI assistants that are like external agents. Uh, and I think trying to figure out where one starts and the other stops and what's the best way to incorporate them into some of these virtual worlds is something that's, I think, really interesting for me.
Well, and I've sort of been fascinated. You brought up earlier, like a sighted or like an assistant type of thing, and I look at it like if I had some sort of on device, or even if it had to go to the cloud for some functions, having something run on my computer, and I could just go to Steam and fire up any game that may not natively have accessibility in it. And instead of having like a sighted, actual human person, like let's say if I was totally blind and I needed help navigating the world, just conversing with, and if an AI assistant could, kind of help with the areas of whatever game that, oh, I wanted to play this series. I never got to play this, or um, to be able to do those types of things and do that kind of independently would be really fascinating.
Yeah. We think about AI a lot because well, I mean, we do a lot of voice commands and stuff, but that's one of the areas where we're nervous. It's like, do we give the players the power to talk to a generic LLM? Because now they're going to get it to start spouting Nazi propaganda or whatever and make a video, and
Right.
we're going to look like jerks. Um, so
I keep thinking about that Star Wars thing that happened like a couple
yeah,
months ago.
yeah.
Which one is this? Star
Was it
Wars thing? I've heard a
was
lot
it
of fiascos, but I don't think I've heard one involving Star Wars.
was it Fortnite or something where they had like
Yeah, it's
a
one of those. Yeah,
they had like a talking Darth Vader and
yeah, yeah,
they made it and then people were just making it say horrible things, so they had to put the kibosh on it.
That's
yeah.
why we can't have nice things.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But that makes us think about, okay, well, we'll let you talk to the AI any way you want, and then that'll devolve into just a short set of commands, and then those commands will go back out to, AI responses. But, there's no direct path between the user and the AI responding, um, which is hard, because you want to have all that power.
Yeah, and there's also questions of scale, right? Because every time somebody talks to an AI, you have to it costs money. It's not just like a website, right? Or at least costs
Right.
processing power.
Well,
So
and I mean, we're all on gaming computers, so we can
environmental
run it
costs.
locally, but
Yeah, true.
that's another issue. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've been experimenting a little bit with Olama, which is it's an AI that's designed to just run locally. Or it's not even AI, it's like a platform. You pick which
Right.
type of AI you want, whether it's like Gemma or DeepSeek or whatever, and then
Hmm.
just runs it on your computer. And it's not as powerful as the big, models that Anthropic or OpenAI or whatever running, but
Right.
it's local, it's private, and you don't have to pay somebody, a cent every time they use it.
Right.
But I don't know how much that scales. I'm sure probably somebody like an Xbox could run something like that because it's the same types of graphics cards are good for it. But
Well,
Yeah.
and that's why I love the idea of having like, yeah, you have these big cloud models for general purpose, but like I could see kind of building on what you were talking about, Dylan, where like you have a AI that's devoted to XR accessibility, or you have a gaming AI, or you have like a educational, a science or like a textbook study AI, and you could choose which one of those you wanted, so you're not grabbing the whole thing. But like on this device, I'm going to have its focus to be mainly this. And so if I could download uh, an AI model for the purposes that I want to use it for and not have to go to the cloud all the time, it would help for speed and efficiency, but also just not as much resource. Um, it wouldn't use as much resources having to go to the cloud all the time.
right, right. I think that speaks to the difference between retrieval augmented generation and cache augmented generation, if I'm getting these terms right. Because I think retrieval augmented generation basically says you take an AI and you tell it, okay, every time before you answer, look at this database, right? Which means on the one hand that it takes longer, it has to access this database a lot, but on the flip side, you can change things to that database without having to tweak the AI. The flip side is
Right.
cache augmented generation, where you take an AI and you fundamentally train the AI on a specific data set, so it's kind of baked into it. And then at that point, it's going to be worse at answering everything else, but better at answering that, and you won't have to
And maybe the approach you
access
take
it.
is you have the cache-based AI. You could do that like over the web or over the internet, and then maybe the cache-based AI, maybe you download a what was the other retrieval-based AI every so often that is more updated on things that the cache-based one learns. So you're downloading a local model every so often that knows a little more, if that makes sense.
I think it depends on your kind of trade-offs between time and accuracy and how long you have to train. Because every time you train a new model, that's a lot of computing power. Uh, but yeah, it's interesting to see the ways that they're growing, the ways that they're becoming more customizable. Uh, yeah, we'll see how it goes. This brave new world.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. It's so super fun, and I'm going to
Yeah.
particularly hand out the scene weaving thing to my development team. So this is really great, and I have to jump off to another call, but
Yeah, yeah.
to
Petra,
know
if
about
you
you
if you
guys.
want, we have a GitHub that has a lot of really useful resources in it as well. Um,
And I
so
have one of your PhD students from Cornell, Ria, who's doing
oh,
Axe.
Ria, oh,
Yeah.
wonderful.
I'm her mentor right now, so she's going to come out here to Michigan. I'm at the University of Michigan, and yeah, so it'll be really nice. We get to play with one another right now.
Fantastic. Yeah, tell her hi from me. I like I said, I'm based in Oakland, so I don't actually get to see all the New York folks all that often.
We're coming out for residency at UC Berkeley actually in January.
Ah,
We're bringing the Planting Disabled Futures to UC Berkeley. We work with the emerging technology team there, so that'll be really
that's
fun.
fantastic. Well, definitely hit me up because that is I got my undergrad and my master's at Berkeley, and I'm real close. So I'd
That'd be
love to get involved when if you're
Yes,
in
yes,
the
and that'd
area.
be nice. We'll have a bunch of other the house parties as well as a whole performance, with the stuff. So it should be really nice. Lovely to
Nice.
meet you all, and I'll join you again for one of the other ones.
Yeah,
Love.
likewise.
Cool.
Thanks very much, all. Great discussion today.
Bye bye.
Yeah, it was
All
fun.
right.
Thank you.
Bye, all.
Yep. Have a good one.